The US has allowed the sale of Iranian oil at sea in its latest effort to counter rising oil prices due to the escalating West Asia war. Now, the Treasury Department waived sanctions on Iranian oil that have already been loaded onto tankers through April 19th. Well, this measure follows similar decisions on Russian oil on the water. For years, the US had prevented the sale of Iranian oil and fuels to most of the world. Yet, Washington is now facilitating oil sales from a country against whom it is waging a war. And analysts are calling these decisions desperate measures due to soaring crude prices to multi-year highs. Now, the objective is clear: allow as many barrels of oil as possible to flow into the international market to improve the global supply situation and curb the spiraling crude prices. The decision to waive sanctions is also targeted at hoarding. For years now, over 90% of Iranian oil exports have been going to one country, which is China. And technically, this move will not really increase the global oil supply, but the decision will at best enable other countries also to buy Tehran's oil. In a post on X, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent called the waiver a narrowly tailored short-term authorization, permitting the sale of Iranian oil, which is currently stranded at sea, adding that the measure will release about 140 million barrels. But that figure includes cargoes in transit which may already be booked and not likely to reflect actual availability. Goldman Sachs estimates there are 105 million barrels of Iranian oil on water. The global market is facing a daily shortage, which is estimated between 10 million and 14 million barrels per day. The International Energy Agency labeled it the largest supply disruption in history. Well, the Strait of Hormuz carries about 20 million barrels per day, or 1/5 of global oil, and has been effectively blocked. In addition, major Gulf producers have reduced output by at least 10 million barrels per day. So the release of Iranian oil is at best only a fraction of the actual deficit in supply due to the war. Bessent also said that Iran will have difficulty accessing any revenue which is generated at current market prices exceeding $100 per barrel. The total value of Iran's oil at sea exceeds $14 billion. However, the Treasury Secretary said that Iran will have extreme difficulty accessing any revenue which is generated from these sales. According to Bessent, those proceeds are expected to be held in restricted accounts to prevent them from funding Tehran's military efforts. The US has continued to maintain maximum pressure on Iran and its access to the international financial system. But previously, Iran has managed to earn from its oil exports despite the sanctions through crypto and other forms of settlements. And to discuss more, joining us live from London is Mr. Chris Doyle. He is the Director of Council for Arab-British Understanding and the current lead spokesperson of the organisation. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast, Mr. Doyle. Now, the US has lifted sanctions on some 140 million barrels of Iranian oil as the Trump administration sought to lower gas prices. Now, Mr. Doyle, what does this mean for US and Iran? And has Trump essentially run out of options here? What's your take on this?
Desperate. It shows that in no way can they control or lower the energy prices, that they actually are resorting to lifting sanctions on Iranian oil at sea. It's not going to make a huge difference, but even the very fact of doing it shows and highlights just how little room for maneuver they have to deal with this burgeoning energy crisis. And yet at the same time, we also see this spat between President Trump and NATO allies, where he is demanding that they take action to open the Strait of Hormuz. And he says, and he's just posted on his Truth Social, that this would be very safe and very easy for them to do. Well, if it was so easy and so safe, then why can't the United States, with its huge and beautiful armada, open those straits? No, the reality is that Iran is largely in control of the way in which this war is escalating. I'm not saying it's winning it conventionally, but it is determining that there will be massive costs economically, environmentally, to the global power base, the global economy. And we're no really closer to getting to an end to this extremely costly and unnecessary war.
Right, and Mr. Dole, President Trump said that the U.S. is considering winding down military efforts in the Middle East. But officials said that thousands more U.S. troops are headed there. And a senior Iranian official said that Tehran doesn't believe that Trump is going to, make good on this claim. Do you see merit in these claims that are surfacing just now, Mr. Dole?
It's really hard to know what's going on because on the one hand, every day you go and listen to a Pentagon press briefing, and the next day they'll be hitting Iran harder than ever before. And then at the same time, they're saying they're going to wind down, that they're bringing troops into the region in order to potentially mount some sort of amphibious landing, which would be extremely risky. And then the president is talking about winding down. It still looks as if they're shambolically, pursuing a bunch of tactics with no strategy at all to get out of this. The hole that they have dug for themselves is very deep, and there's no ladder available.
Right, and what we have seen is a lot of claims, counterclaims, and also a lot of backtracking. Do you think that based on the trajectory that we're on, the operation is going to, continue in a similar capacity that we're witnessing, or is there some shakeup that we should be bracing for in the days coming ahead, Mr. Dole?
Well, we have seen the Iranian leadership change some of its approaches. It's cut down on some of its ballistic missiles. Now, that's either because they can't fire them, but they sent 2 ballistic missiles towards Diego Garcia, and that is over a huge distance, depending on where it was fired from, much further than the 2,000 kilometers maximum range that was presumed to be the case. So Iran is demonstrating that it can actually bring in other areas into play into this conflict. It is a message as much as anything else, rather than some great new military tactic. But I think ultimately the United States needs a successful mediation process. It needs somebody else to provide that exit ramp, to get some sort of ceasefire deal by which they can draw down, because it's very difficult to be able to wind down troops if you're still in conflict with Iran, if those straits are still closed, and if there are still daily attacks on American allies, particularly the Gulf and Israel and others, that is causing so much harm to the global economy.
Absolutely. And of course, this is an evolving situation, and we'll have to see how it escalates or winds down from here. But for now, thank you so much, Mr. Dole, for joining us on the broadcast and sharing your perspective with us.
A pleasure. Thank you.